We good?
Yep.
All right, we're good, Scott.
Excellent, excellent. Well, welcome to this regular meeting of the Planning Board for the City of Birmingham, Wednesday, September 23rd, 2020. Could we please call the roll?
Scott Klein,
Present.
Robin Boyle,
Here.
Stuart Jeffries,
Here.
Bert Kosek,
Here.
Daniel Scher,
Here.
Brian Williams,
Present.
Janelle Whipple-Boyce, Jason Emmerich,
Here.
Nassim Ramin,
You unmute.
I'm trying to unmute her. It's not working. Sorry. Are you hitting it at the same time as me, Jamil?
Is here.
Okay, Nassim, try to unmute yourself too, because when I do it, it's not working. Okay, well,
I don't think she can hear.
Okay, well, I can see her. Can that be enough?
I think we can vouch that she's at the meeting.
Great,
Um,
okay. Rachel Hester and Rachel Hester, June Lee. Okay,
Yeah, we are point of procedure though, Jana, before we get into the minutes, with Miss Whipple-Boyce down and with, oh, it looks like Nassim can, are you here now? Can you speak? Miss Ramin?
Nassim, can you talk?
I'm here.
Excellent,
great.
Yep, I think so.
excellent. Jana,
Okay.
is Jason up this time or was it Nassim? I think it was Jason, was that not correct?
I think so.
Okay, so Jason, you'll be the voting member tonight, just for the record. Review and approval of the minutes from September 9th. Do you have any comments on Mr. Scher?
I have two. On page 4 of the minutes, in the, and I don't even know how to count it, but in the paragraph that says in reply to Mr. Scher, kind of 2/3 of the way down, the very last sentence said, he, which I think was Matt Lambert, said, Old Woodward from Booth to Maple. So there's something missing there. It's either Booth Park, because I don't think there's a Booth Street, or it's a different street. I don't recall exactly what he said. Maybe another board member does, but
It was the park.
it was a park. So probably the word park needs to go in.
Okay,
Then on page 6, in the paragraph that says in reply to Planning Director Ecker, I think the context is missing there. So I think it should say in reply to Planning Director Ecker about whether an alternate planning board member may serve on an ad hoc committee for a matter that will come before the planning board. Mr. Scher cautioned, blah, blah, blah.
all right. I didn't get all that. Can you repeat that? And we'll
Sure
double
can.
check.
So after Planning Director
Yeah,
Ecker,
Yep.
concerning whether
Mhm.
alternate planning board member
Mm-hmm.
can serve on an ad hoc committee for a project that will come before the planning board. That's the insert.
Okay, any other comments or corrections from anybody else? Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve as amended?
You do.
Motion by Mr. Scher, do we have a second? Looks like second, Mr. Williams, is that correct?
Yes.
Seconded by Mr. Williams. Any conversation at the board level?
Mr. Chairman, I'll abstain. I was not present at the meeting.
Similarly, I was not at the meeting either.
Can we please call the roll?
Daniel Scher,
Yes.
Brian Williams,
Yes.
Jason Emmerich,
Yes.
Scott Klein,
Yes,
Stuart Jeffries.
Yes.
Okay,
and abstentions noted.
yep.
Chairperson's comments. Real briefly, we have a good agenda tonight with a number of site plan issues, special land use issues, etc. For those from the general public, residents who are watching this, there will be an opportunity for you to provide public comment tonight. I will, at some point during each presentation, stop and turn it over to the public to invite for public comment. When that happens, if you could please use the command console at the bottom center of your screen. There should be a button where you can raise your hand. You would please use that raise your hand function. I have a list of everybody in the meeting. I will do my best to call on you in order as best I can. And when I do, please introduce yourself and provide your brief comment, knowing that we do want to leave time for others to provide their comments as well. Board members, again, we will do everything by roll call. And if you could help me make sure I know who is saying things with regard to specific motions or seconds, that would be helpful. Gianna, any changes to the agenda as published?
No, there are not.
Excellent. So let's move into the thick of it, as we say. Special land use permit amendment for 768 North Old Woodward, the French Levy. Now, board, this is both a special land use permit and a final site plan and design review, which is item F2 on the agenda. We traditionally kind of talk about these in concert, though they will be two different motions. So if it's no objection from the board, I'd like, Nick, if you could take us through both conversations on this, and then we will handle both applications.
All right, let me just pull up something for you all to look at while I talk. All right, so board, you've kind of gotten a heads up at that this has been coming a couple times, so you know the gist of it. But you know, for the public and just a refresher, this is a special land use permit application for a food or drink establishment in the O2, which is Office Commercial Zoning District at the north end of downtown Birmingham. The overall need for this special land use permit is that simple, that in the O2 zoning district, a food or drink establishment requires it. There will be no liquor sales. They're not going for a bistro license. They're not going for an economic development license. It's not a regulated use. It's simply a restaurant. And as we mentioned last time, this restaurant is currently open and operating right now as a carry-out only style restaurant. We consider that more of a specialty food store. There are no tables and chairs in the building right now for on-site, on-premise consumption. A little bit of history that's important here. You may very well have visited LY Sushi, which was the most recent tenant. Previous to that, Cucina Midoro, and then there was a deli before that, all the way back as far as 2008. Before that, I'm not quite sure. But somewhere in either late 2018 or early 2019, the building was struck by a vehicle. And the repair work to the front facade took the better part of a year. So the main reason they're here right now and not continuing what we consider a legal non-conforming use at that site is because the legal non-conforming status was discontinued after 6 months as required by Article 6, I believe that's in, of the zoning ordinance. So this new proposed restaurant, it's called the French Lady. It plans to serve authentic French cuisine. The proposal in general includes a kitchen in the rear, a service counter with select baked goods, desserts, a refrigerator, that type of thing. And there will also be 28 tables at 28 chairs, at 6 tables in the dining area at the front for full service dining. They are not proposing outdoor dining at this time. We all know, we've been up there, the sidewalks are very slim. There is no room for tables and chairs out front. There's currently also a deck and some stairs in the back that kind of connects somewhat to parking lot 6 to the southeast. There's no public access to that deck currently. And finally, if the applicant does indeed receive The special land use permit, their planned hours will be 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. daily. As noted, the building itself is a one-story commercial building. It's got one-story commercial buildings on either side of it. Salon-based businesses to the north and south. Since there's no work being done to the building, there are no setback or height issues present. Same with a lot of the screening, the mechanical, the dumpster, the parking lot. They've stated that they're going to be using a shared dumpster in the rear. They've signed a contract for a piece of a shared dumpster. That dumpster is likely not screened. I don't think any of those dumpsters back in parking lot 6 are screened. So we think you should discuss whether or not you want to tackle that now, have this applicant do it or not. Parking lot, there is no off-street parking facility. Mechanical equipment, there's existing rooftop units. The applicant is not proposing to change those. But again, if the planning board does wish to discuss the screening of those units, now would be the time to do so. No landscaping proposed or existing. Streetscape, again, no changes. It will remain existing. There are no new loading spaces required, no off-street parking required. It's in the parking assessment district. There's no new lighting required. As you can see here, there's 4 goosenecks that were existing and a wall sconce. They are not proposing to change that. You may have noticed I didn't get very many departmental comments on time. The police department had said there's no concerns. I have since heard back from the Department of Public Services who had no comments, the fire department who had no comments, and I spoke with the building division who also had no comments. Finally, the design review. Again, there are literally no exterior changes proposed as a part of this, I guess I'll say, special land use permit and tenant build out. All the work they did was inside and it was very minor paint and just some finishes here and there. I did want to mention that we talked about signage. They were not ready for a sign at this point, and I've explained to them the process for getting a sign in the future and that approval will be required. With that, we feel that the applicant met both Article 7, Section 7.27 in regards to site plan and Article 7, Section 7.36 in regards to a special land use permit. We feel that they meet those standards outlined in those sections. So our recommendation currently is that the planning division, or the planning board, excuse me, recommend approval to the city commission, the special land use permit and final site plan, excuse me, for 768 North Old Woodward, the French Lady. And excuse me again, if you'd like me to bring up any specific pages, feel free to let me know. Other than that, I'm available for questions, and I believe that I saw the applicant pop on if you had questions for.
Okay. Does anyone have questions first for Nick? Mr. Williams?
I noticed in the original materials, I haven't checked, we have to separate the motions, but
Oh, yeah.
the planning board has final site plan approval. That isn't required to go to the city commission, is it?
No, that's my mistake. You're entirely correct about that. So
Right.
I would just.
The motions have to be separated, and the one is a recommendation, and that's the
Correct.
special land use permit, and the other final site plan approval. The planning board has jurisdiction.
That's right, JNR, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, it's they refer the site plan to the planning board. I can double check the language if you like right now. Just to make sure we're aligned.
Well, they're lumped together in the motion, proposed motion.
Right. Well, yeah, I think we've got a couple of motions we can come up with. I think while Janet's checking
all right.
that, any other questions for Nick? I see Mr. Kozak. Could be unmute, Mr. Kozak? Or you?
Okay, if I could add, what the ordinance says is that the City Commission shall refer the site plan and the design to the planning board for its review and recommendation. After receiving the recommendation, the City Commission shall review the site plan and design of the buildings and uses proposed, but for the site described in the application of the amendment.
All right.
So the City Commission will make the final decision on both the site plan and the special land use.
Okay. Great. Mr. Kozik, please.
Ed, can you show where the trash dumpster is and
Yeah, to be fair, I'm not 1000% sure, but let me see if I get my drawing tool out here. Let's go blue. I think it's somewhere in this area,
okay.
but I'd like some help from the applicant because they're also
Okay, and which one is the subject site? If you can just, which out of the, just looking at
this
the area.
this building here. You can see the parcels don't line up very well on this map, but
Gotcha, okay. And that's a shared dumpster by a number of those buildings and tenants?
yeah, and I wasn't told how many tenants and who, but yes.
The dumpster is not immediately behind the site.
No, it is not on site.
And then the owner of the property, do they just own this building or do they own other properties? Where I'm going with it is, can we make that, I believe that trash dumpsters should be screened from view and our ordinance requires it for new construction, obviously. And as you brought it up, it's something we could be considering here, but does that fall within the jurisdiction of the ownership of this property? Maybe the applicant can speak to that. So
Yeah, that'd be better.
if you don't know the answer.
Just because I'm not sure how many buildings that they own and whatnot.
Thanks.
Other questions, Jason?
Kind of a similar question. I was just looking at Google Earth and wondering about the rooftop units, and Nick's reports that we may consider screening that. From what I can see, the rooftop unit appears to be kind of not very high and shifted pretty far back. I couldn't even see it on Google Street View. I don't know if Nick had any comments on that. I don't know if I would require it in this case because I don't even know if we can see it. But curious, Nick, if you've seen it, if you did a site inspection or anything.
Yeah, you 1000% cannot see it from the sidewalk. Now, there are some taller buildings nearby that, now that the Pearl's been built, you can see all the rooftops along this line. But I would wager to say that next to none of these are screened, and that the public view, especially from the sidewalk, but let alone
Street.
and the adjacent buildings, I think it's little to none.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Other questions for Nick? So Nick, just real quickly, the crux of this is that through reasons that beyond the control of the owner of the property, someone ran a car into their building, and otherwise they'd have a legal non-conforming use that might have continued.
Mhm.
Did this the legal non-conforming, the sushi place, did it have indoor seating?
Another thing that I was not made aware of, just simply that it was a restaurant.
Is this adjacent to any single-family residential?
No, you can see on the right here, if I can draw again.
Yep.
That this is
I
the
just wanted
nearest
for the record,
across the river and several
parcels away.
several hundred feet away.
Okay, thank you. Is the applicant here? Would they care to come forward and provide any other additional detail on what they're planning to do?
Let me look. My guess is that it's Claude here.
Could the applicant, if they are present, please use the raise their hand function so we can find you?
Shall I try to unmute Claude?
Yeah. She seemed to be willing to speak tonight when I spoke to her last. Oh, she seems to be unmuted now.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening. Could you please state your name for the record, and are you the operator of the restaurant?
Yes, I'm Claude Pellerin. You see Claude Bouly because it's my maiden name.
Sure. Thank you very much. Is there anything you would like to add? Could you explain where the dumpster is located or anything else that you feel that we need to understand?
The dumpster is at the end of the parking lot, meaning that when we go outside through the deck, we go down the stairs and we arrive at the dumpster. So we can put our trash there very easily.
And you haven't reached an agreement with the owner of that dumpster, is that correct?
Yes. One Source Waste, it's Mervyn Echo, something like that, ACHO. And I signed an agreement with them and I can use that dumpster, yeah.
Wonderful. Does anyone at the board have any questions of the applicant? No. Thank you very much, ma'am. We appreciate your time. Thank you. At this point, we'll bring it back to the board. And in fact, I am going to go to the public. Is there anyone in the public that would care to comment on this particular petition? If so, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom center of your screen. I am not seeing any hands go up. Jana?
No, I'm not seeing any either.
Okay, so we will bring it back to the board. Board, any conversation? Anyone wants to start? Mr. Jeffries. Fitting
Yes,
as our foodie of the group, please.
So that Robin's not the only one who does site visits. I got hungry mid-afternoon and I decided to walk up and took a look at it. And a couple things are kind of neat here. And one is there's not really much up there, even though, you know, we've had this continuing use. I think it's not like right up on top of another restaurant, which is nice because there's a lot of density across the street of apartments and stuff. It's a cuisine that we don't currently have present in the community. It really, the size of it really feels like it's a bistro size and, you know, or a small restaurant size. And the back, if they were ever to have outdoor seating on that back deck, would, mark my words, be the best seat in all of Birmingham restaurants. It overlooks, it's in the trees and overlooks the river. It's just incredible. So hopefully that's something down the line, but the dumpster is so disconnected and obviously a third party. So I personally don't feel that this is something to saddle a very, very small, you know, business with right now. I think it's something we should keep on our radar to try to get that. But the public access in the back is very limited, if almost non-existent. It's mostly employee entrances and stuff, and so it's just not a huge concern. And I also agree with the rooftop units. I couldn't see anything from ground level.
Yeah. Any other comments from the board? Any concerns? Seeing none, is anybody prepared to make a motion?
I'll make a motion if you give me a second. To get back to it.
Anything for you, Mr. Jeffries.
All right, let's see here. Or I guess I could go to my screen that they sent. Hold on. Okay, here we go.
Real simple.
Okay, I make a motion to recommend approval to the City Commission, the special land use permit and final. Do I have to do these separately?
Yes, we do need these separately.
Okay, so I'll do the land use first, or do you want the other one first?
I would suggest doing the final site plan first.
Okay. I make a motion to recommend approval to the City Commission, the final site plan for 768 North Old Woodward, also known as the French Lady.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Is there any conversation at the board level? Seeing none, I'll go to the public one last time. Is there any conversation on the final site plan motion? Going once, Do not see any. We'll bring it back to the board. If we could please call the roll.
Stuart Jeffries,
Yes.
Brian Williams,
Yes.
Jason Emmerich,
Yes.
Robin Boyle,
Yes.
Scott Klein,
Yes.
Bert Kosek,
Yes.
Daniel Scher. Daniel Scher.
Do not see Mr. Scherer in the meeting anymore.
Okay.
His phone died.
Yeah, he was having technical difficulties.
Okay.
Well,
I'll mark
He's
him as
not
absent.
waiting to get back in, so he must he's indisposed right now.
Okay, well, I mean, we do have a 6-0 vote. I think it's probably appropriate to not do anything outside of that realm. We'll call the motion carried at 6-0. So let us move on. And with Mr. Scherer not available, Jana, would be appropriate for Naseem to step in from this point on?
Yes,
Mr. Scherer?
yes, she could do that.
Jones? Okay. Thank you. Now, could I please have a motion related to the special land use permit for this
Right.
particular
Go
project?
ahead, Stuart, you're on a roll.
All right. Hey, I got it pulled up. I'd like to make a motion to recommend approval to the city commission, the special land use permit for 768 North Old Woodward, also known as the French Lady.
Support.
We have a motion by Mr. Jeffries. We have support by Mr. Williams. Any conversation at the board level for the motion
Yes.
to approve the special land use? Mr. Boyd.
Yeah, I don't know whether this is appropriate, but let me raise it, and it may be out with the realm of our jurisdiction. The reason that it came to us, as far as I understand it, from listening to Nick's comments and reading it, was that it was because of a 6 months delay that led to the legal non-conforming use lapsing. Therefore, the applicant was required to go through this process. I'm wondering, in the circumstances that we face just now, with land use change in a period of insecurity, that we might consider changing the 6 months to a year to give people more time and less impact. This is not inexpensive. They've got to come back to do a 2-foot sign, and I don't know what that'll cost, as well as the cost of doing this. I was wondering if this is sometime we might be a little bit more cognizant of the challenges there are for small businesses. We're hearing it all the time. We have a role to play.
Fair point, Mr. Boyle. I think, Jana, that would probably be a policy issue that the city commission would need to weigh on. Am I not mistaken?
Yes, it's actually in the zoning ordinance under non-conforming uses. So we would have to amend the zoning ordinance to do that.
So I mean, to Mr. Boyle's point, this is going to be minuted, and perhaps the city commission can take that under advisement
Put
and
it,
allow us to,
put it as one of the items for the joint meeting,
perhaps.
and he can make his plea directly.
Fair point, Mr. Boyle. Any other comments from the board? Mr. Jeffries?
I just got a text from Mr. Scherer wants to let you know that his equipment's failed. He's going to try to reboot his system to see if it fixed the problem.
It's all right. We like Naseem better anyway.
That's on the record.
That is on the record. One attorney to another as well. So with that, I see no further comments. I will go to the public one last time. Any conversation from the public related to specifically the motion for special land use permit on this property for the French Lady? I see no hands going up, so we will bring it back to the board to vote on the approval of the special land use permit for the French Lady. Could you please call the roll?
Stuart Jeffries,
Yes.
Brian Williams,
Yes.
Jason Emmerich,
Yes.
Naseem Merman,
Yes.
Robin Boyle,
Yes.
Scott Klein,
Yes.
Bert Kosek.
Yes.
It is unanimous. Congratulations, ma'am. Welcome to Birmingham. We look forward to you opening up in full capacity sometime in the near future. Let us move along to item F1, which is the final site plan and design review for 469 to 479 South Old Woodward, project M1. Okay. Nick, are you going to take us through this one, or is this
You betcha. It's almost the Nick show tonight, but Jana's got one at the end for you. So a slightly, slightly bigger project here. I'll pull up something for you to look at and talk just a bit. This building, 469-479 South Old Woodward, south end of downtown Birmingham. It's in the B3 and D4 zoning districts. As we very well know at this point, the almost half an acre parcel, it's got 2 one-story commercial buildings and a small little parking area on the Woodward side. It's smack dab in the middle between the Birmingham Place mixed-use building to the north and the 555 mixed-use building to the south. This is an application review for a final site plan and design review, proposing a new 5-story mixed-use building with first floor retail. And this is going to sound odd, but 121 or 84 parking spaces, which are spread out through underground subterranean lifts and a ground level facility. It's got second floor office or residential units with 9 units plus a storage, fitness, and community area, and 41 residential units on floors 3 through 5 and a rooftop patio. You very well may recall on June 24th, 2020, the Planning Board accepted the CIS with 5 conditions. I'm going to let the applicant explain to you what they've done in terms of satisfying those conditions. They have said that they have worked on those. More importantly, for this review, there were also 11 conditions for approval for the preliminary site plan. I'm not going to read through them all, but bulk setback height requirements, some missing details on the rooftop units, the materials, some problems with parking, and all that stuff. And I will provide further details in the relevant sections, but the applicant has provided much of what was required at that time. I've now got plans that contain more detail on all the rooms and bedrooms in the units. I've got revised rooftop plans that have no habitable space. I've got details on all the RTUs. I've got an updated site plan that has the correct amount of street trees. I've got the material specs and the materials noted on the elevations. I've got glazing calculations and all that good stuff. The applicant still appears to, and we talked about this a bit during preliminary, but they still appear to be seeking a variance for the parking facility within the first 20 feet on the Hazel frontage and the off-street loading spaces. In regards, so a little more detail. Someone say something?
No, I'm sorry, Nick. Go ahead.
A little more detail for the setback and height. I mentioned now this was an issue originally, but there's a minimum floor area per unit based on the number of bedrooms based in the unit. The applicant has submitted plans showing several 1-bedroom units that range from 670 to 1210 square feet, and several 2-bedroom units ranging from 788 to 1295 square feet, both meeting the requirements of minimum floor area per unit. We also talked about projections into the right-of-way last time, and if you recall, the Planning Board approved the projections into the right-of-way. These were the balconies, the terraces you see here on the South Old Woodward and Hazel frontage. So I note now that there seems to be, or what seems to be, a minor mistake on the site plans. I'll just bring those up to explain it easier. In terms of those projections, where am I at? I'm all zoomed in. So you can see here, this is the 2-foot marker. They appear to stick out a little bit more than 2 feet now. I'm told by the applicant that that's a mistake. If they were to stick out further, they would need a lease and approval through the City Commission. Right. I'll only require new plans. If that is the case, that is a mistake, I'll need new plans with the correct dimensions. But I did note that actually what I didn't see last time were these entry canopies. So I asked the applicant that they provide a little bit more detail on those canopies. So here you can see this one sticks out 4 feet 2 inches, and this one here on the South Old Woodward frontage projects 5 feet. So what I needed from them, that's good information, but not enough information. The ordinance requires removable features such as canopies. Sorry, I got to pull up the encroachment with less than 15 feet of clearance above the sidewalk shall not extend into or occupy more than 2/3 of the width of the sidewalk or 5 feet, whichever is less, and it must not interfere with streetscape. So I noted it does not interfere with streetscape, but I don't have the dimensions of the sidewalk to ensure that these projections are approvable by the planning board. So I'm asking for revised plans showing such. The 5th floor is still set back enough 10 feet, 45 degrees. That's all good. The rooftop patio, as I mentioned, they removed the what we considered to be habitable space at the time. I'll show you where. In this area right here, what have been drawings? This area right here used to have a room, which we talked a lot about last time. They have since removed that. They will not be seeking a variance for that. It is not proposed anymore. They meet the requirements. Screening and landscaping, the dumpster is still proposed entirely within the building. There are 2 separate solid waste areas fully screened by the building. The parking lot, I should have mentioned at the start that, in thinking of this about this over the weekend and the last few days, there are some things that I missed. This is one of them, the parking lot screening. I noted there's 2 underground levels of parking fully screened within underground, but the issue comes up with the ground level parking space here. So the surface level parking space lot, aside from the issues with the 20 feet that we will get into a little later, are also required to be fully screened from view. Right now, here you can see that there is glazing proposed in the exact area of that parking facility. So, if this is clear glass as required by the ordinance, you'll be able to see right into that parking facility, which is not really fully screened. So we're going to require proper screening as required by Article 4 of the ordinance. And I suspect that when we do require that screening, that the glazing requirements or the glazing calculations will change on this facade. So it kind of compounds a little bit. So I wanted to make sure I mentioned that, even though it was not in your report, your original report that you received. Mechanical equipment. This is another updated section. Again, I apologize for this in all other instances. I noted that there is one ground-mounted transformer on the Woodward side. It's on one hand, it's nice to see that this is being taken care of so early. So often we see these kind of just tossed in at the end and screening issues arise. But you can see here where my cursor is that there's a ground-mounted transformer. In the previous set of plans, there was window glazing here. So I raised the question, is that fully screened from public view? But now it is simply just an open kind of corridor there where the transformer is. So I've mentioned that in your report that it's located behind a glass window, but actually it's not located behind anything, any walls or anything. So it still needs to be screened from public view, and I still need details on what that screening will be, whether it be metal, wood, what have you. Landscaping, there is no landscaping proposed on site. There are some planter boxes, excuse me, on the rooftop patio, but nothing than that. The streetscape, I've got plenty of street frontage here, as we all know, fronts 3 streets. The applicant has provided trees as required on all, including Woodward at this point. We also see, I'll bring you over here, some bike racks up front. It looks like 6, and street lights all down the Woodward and Hazel facades. What we didn't see were benches and trash receptacles you, the planning board, may wish to require that on any of the frontages, whichever you may choose. And we also wanted to make sure that we were clear that the phase 3 of the South Old Woodward reconstruction project is happening soon, planned for 2022. The construction schedules may very well clash, so it's going to be important to work together, city and applicant, to make sure that, well, for one, nothing's done twice, but two, to make sure that the streetscape matches the plans for the South Old Woodward reconstruction project. And that's along South Old Woodward and Hazel, the project boundaries. The parking section, I lamented last time that, Robin, you weren't here, but I mentioned that the parking section was like 2 pages long, and it'd be, I knew I'd hear a comment from you. It's almost as long this time, but there's still a quirk. So as I kind of alluded to earlier, and we talked about last time in the master plan discussion about mixed use districts, the applicant is currently unsure whether the office use on the second floor is now appropriate with the changing office environment due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So what we have here in the parking analysis is one option for a second floor office, the second option for second floor residential. I note in my report that either way, if they go second floor office, they're going to be required 96.68 parking spaces, and they would be providing 121. So they would be overparked for that. If they were to go residential, excuse me, they would be required to have 75 parking spaces, which they would be providing 84. So they would still be overparked for that as well. That clause in Article 4, Section 4.50, allowing a shared use parking type situation with office and residential in the same building, would only apply in scenario 1 if office were to be proposed. So the same issue still exists I mentioned earlier. There's an off-street parking facility located within the 20 feet of the Hazel Street frontage. That's going to require variance. Loading, again, they're required to have 2 off-street loading spaces. This is a requirement of the B3 zoning district. So whether they choose to go all office or all residential on the second floor, they're still required to have 2 off-street loading spaces or obtain a variance from the Board of Zoning Appeals. Vehicular circulation hasn't changed since preliminary. The garage entrance is still proposed in the same location. There's a garage door, a roll-up garage door, in 2 places. One, let me get my marker out again. I just feel like it's easier. One here at the main garage, or actually, I apologize. I don't believe that's correct. I believe the overhead door is only right here. And you'll see in the elevation drawings. So this will be accessible to anybody so that the retail spaces can be served by car traffic along with the on-street parking spaces that are on Hazel. Pedestrian circulation also changed a little bit. There's still the main entrance here, South Old Woodward, Hazel. They added some doors where there weren't last time during the preliminary review here, and here to access the retail spaces. So that's all good. Lighting. Lighting was a section where I noted a lot of deficiencies. There were some lights drawn into the elevations, but we didn't have any specifications, nor did we have a photometric plan for the lights. I want to tell you that I have received revised elevations showing all the light fixtures. I've got specs of all the light fixtures, and I've got a photometric plan. It doesn't necessarily apply today because it wasn't in on time, but for right now, this section still stands that the applicant, if you were to make a motion for approval, postponement, denial, whichever, the applicant will still need to submit the light fixtures, the photometric plan, etc. comments were pretty much the same as last time. You'll notice that the Department of Public Services also mentioned the South Old Woodward reconstruction project. The fire department, all the same comments as last time. The building division, most of the same comments as last time. Nothing alarming right now. Finally, the design review. The building facade here is going to be 3 main materials. It's got a granite base here with brick on the first floor, second floor, third floor, and fourth floor facades. It's proposed on the 5th floor to have a Nighthawk gray metal cladding. All these materials considered, they appear to meet the 90% of the exterior being glass, brick, cut stone, cast stone, stucco, or wood as required by the overlay district. Onto the glass, I've got all the specs on the glass. Importantly, especially recently, our recent discussions, the glass is described as SunGuard neutral clear glass at 80% VLT on the first floor as required by the ordinance, and 78% VLT on the upper floors, which also meets the clarity rules that we have in Article 4 of the ordinance. I've also got glazing calcs here as submitted by the applicant. You saw that the South Old Woodward frontage was good, upper and lower both meet the percentage requirements. The Hazel Street frontage, the upper floors was a little high at 37.6%, where 35% is required. And the Woodward Avenue first floor was a little low at 68%, where 70% is required. Now, again, as I mentioned earlier, these could change when we require the ground level parking facility to be screened, as well as the transformer location here. I'll draw it in again. My markers show up. Well, follow my cursors here. In the glazing calculations, they consider this area glass. So that is not correct, and I will need to have revised glazing calculations that meet the ordinance. I thought it was also important at this time to mention that there is no signage proposed on this building, nor are they required to submit details on signage at this point. But it does appear to me that if signage were to be proposed in the future, it may be a little difficult just based on the building design. You may argue that these bays in here in between the columns would be a good place for signage. It may just be up to the creativity of the sign designer, but just worth mentioning. The required attachments, again, something I'll update you on. I noted that the existing conditions plan was not submitted. I have since received that. It wasn't in your package, so it still needs to be in the motion tonight, but I do have it. Same with the material specification sheets and material samples. I have gotten much more of that, including the lighting. So with that, the planning division did at this time find the proposed final site plan to meet the requirements of Article 7, Section 7.27 of the zoning ordinance. And we recommend that the planning board approve the final site plan and design review for 469, 479 South Old Woodward, Project M1 with the following conditions. The applicant submit revised plans, clarifying projection issues. The applicant provide a 20-foot minimum setback for the parking facility along Hazel or obtain a variance. Applicant submit revised plans showing 2 off-street loading spaces or obtain a variance. Applicant must submit spec sheets on the types and placements of all proposed light fixtures. The applicant revised the glazing calculations to meet 70% on the first floor and a 35% max on the second floor. The applicant must submit an existing conditions plan and material specs. And finally, the applicant must comply with the requests of all city departments. And after that long spiel, again, it applies. If you want me to pull up any specific pages, I'd be happy to. And I'm open to questions.
All right, Mr. Williams.
I have 2 points. What is contained in the quote existing conditions plan?
I will. Oops. All right. Here it is. So we know that Woodward Avenue is a 200-foot right of way, so they've kind of just noted that here. It looks like they've gone 200 feet to the north and south. There's not. I don't have the paper copy to
Okay.
scope it out and see if there's actually a 200-foot radius, but
All right. The second question is, this is final site plan approval. So my question for you and Jana is, do we not have to specify the usage of the second floor at final site plan approval? I mean, either office or residential, but make the decision before there's approval. I mean, the problem with an either or is it doesn't, in my view, we've never done that. But I can only speak to the last 13 years. So it's really a question under the ordinance, but frankly, I'm uncomfortable with approving an either or. I'll just say it flat out. I want to point out too, and I think that the record should reflect if they have to go for a variance for the Board of Zoning Appeals on the setback. I think it's important to note, number one, the size of the property in question that we're talking about. And secondly, it's the only D4 property in the city of Birmingham that isn't in the parking assessment district. Period. And if you'll note that the parking on the first floor is for retail, at least you described it as such.
mm-hmm.
And most people don't worry about, in D4, don't worry about conforming on that issue. So I think it's important for the record to point out that there's a hardship here because they're not in the parking assessment district, even though they're in the D4 zone.
And also to that point, I might butt in really quick. We pointed this out before. The building also has 3 frontages, which restricts that 20-foot setback. And it's another reason to have a hardship on that.
Yeah, good point. So those are the points I had.
Okay, thank you.
And I haven't had an answer to the second floor.
Yeah, Jana, or Nick, Jana, what is your take on this either or scenario placed before us?
Well, what we have done in the past is usually we do know what the use is going to be on the floor. But I guess I would ask the applicant, number one, if anything would change on this site with regards to the footprint or the setbacks or the mass or even the number of parking spaces, because my instinct is that the number of parking spaces are going to remain the same, whether it's office or residential on the second floor. Both are permitted uses. What we have had in the past, and this happened with the one on the Greens Art Supply site, if you remember, they came in and originally they were going to do first floor retail, second floor office, and third floor residential. And then they had such a good demand for residential, they came back and they switched the second floor from office to residential. But that one was different because they were in the parking assessment district. And so they had to add parking for the residential. In this case, they're not in the parking assessment district. So they're going to have their parking, this same number of parking, no matter what use goes on the second floor. So I would say it's up to you. I think you could approve it and they could switch the use if nothing else changed, because both residential and office are permitted uses on the second floor. But that being said, we don't normally do that. But this is definitely, as Mr. Williams said, the only site in the D4 that is not in the parking assessment district.
If I could respond to that by simply saying that I think then that if we're going to permit an either or, then the approval has to basically say that, and somebody needs to draft a paragraph to include that, and then secondly, that if there is a change, that it still meets the requirements as approved. So I think I would look for some language there.
And if I may, Chairman Klein, just to clarify, if the use changed, the parking spaces will also change. If the use is residential, they would not include those subterranean lifts that they would need if it were an office use. But as I mentioned, they would still be overparked by 9 spaces. So just to clarify, the parking totals provided would change if they were to go switch from office to residential, but in either case, they would be overparked.
And the point was that the parking would remain laid out the same. They would simply remove some lifts, correct?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Still 2 underground levels, still the surface level, just the lift.
But I still think we would want some language that there wouldn't be any other substantial changes into what we approve, assuming we would go forward with approval.
Yeah, it is a little odd that we would essentially set them up to just flip between office and residential. Not that they would ever do that, I suppose, but without even submitting a plan.
We've never done it.
Staff. Yeah, it's a little odd, but I do understand the situation. Mr.
Well,
Chair, we'll go with you first.
I mean, there's another way to think about this, and that is that the approval give the applicant a certain amount of time to make an election. And after that, it's fixed. I mean, one of the concerns I have is if we give them carte blanche, 5, 6, 7, 12 years from now, can they come back and say, oh, market's changed, and by right, we want the ability to go back to this plan, from 2020. And
Right.
maybe it'll be a good plan, maybe it won't. But it seems to me that if we're inclined to do it, I would, kind of at some point, whether that's when the building permit's pulled or, at some point require an election of which way they want to go, and then sort of fix the use that way.
Jana, were you trying to say something?
Yes, what I was going to say was, if you're not comfortable doing an either or, then you can pick one and do the approval based on that use on the second floor. My point is, nothing is really going to change with regard to the building and the way it's laid out, other than the floor plan of the second floor. So that's something that we could consider doing administrative approval on in the future if they wanted to change it, only because
Right.
it's going to change. It is not going to change the building in any way.
Right.
Well, the plumbing will change.
The plumbing will
Yeah,
change,
well,
right? But we don't review the plumbing in in that kind of detail.
I hope the plumbing would change.
so let's get back to the actual meat of this. And are there any questions for staff? I see Mr. Boyer, your hands up related to the proposal itself. Mr. Boyer.
Yes, I'm sorry, Scott. I want to stay with the conversation. I'm not the lawyer, and we've got 2 really good lawyers, but I'm a bit concerned about precedent here. If we start to approve either ors with this, somebody tomorrow or in a year's time will come and do something similar, which means we may not be able to control, or there may be major differences which we are then going to face. So I'm a bit concerned about this. I would much rather we ask the applicant to make a choice tonight, one way or the other. Yes, they can come back if they see the need to change the site plan vis-a-vis a change of use. But I think for us to go forward with alternatives in our signed document, we don't sign them anymore, but you know what I mean, would be a mistake.
And I agree with you wholeheartedly. Mr. Jeffries, can we unmute Mr. Jeffries, please?
Okay. I must be missing something. I don't disagree with having a time frame on it, but if both of them, if we agree with both of them, do we really care? Do we really want to impose something that, I mean, the next 12, 24 months of commercial real estate, nobody here has any crystal ball on. And I mean, if you have one, it's probably broken and probably not any good. And at a time when most communities aren't even getting projects, we're still getting them. I think this is a time where we maybe bend a little bit on this. I do agree with Mr. Scher's point that after it's built, this shouldn't apply. But up to the point that they do it, engaging market interest, we have no none of us benefit if there's empty rooms or an empty office space on there. That's not good for our city. So I have no problem with that because, if you agree with both of them, does it really matter? The changing economic thing. The second point we've had some excellent points brought up for hardship on the first floor with the parking. The other is stand on Hazel Street and turn around. This faces a concrete wall with stone. I mean, who's going to rent that? The retail there on Woodward is going to be a tough sell too. So between that and the D4 comment that it's the only one, I think it's a mistake that's carried forward on this. I think this is a place that we could allow this. I think it makes sense.
I would like to remind everybody this is the planning board meeting and not the Board of Zoning Appeals. Are there any other questions for Nick and for Jana related to the presentation? No. Let me offer forth to the applicant. I know that's the applicant's architect and I believe legal counsel at least is here. Would they like to come forward and provide any clarity, perhaps answer any of the questions that have been raised and talk a little bit about their plans for the now infamous floor number 2? I see Mr. Long has been unveiled. Chris, are you here to speak on behalf? Please introduce yourself.
I'm here, Chris Long, architect for 469-479 Old South Old Woodward, along with Jared Marcus, the owner of the property.
Great.
I'll first apologize for messing this up. I pride myself on being consistent from preliminary to final in terms of the design. The project, as you know, has spanned years. Things have changed, as I'm sure everybody has noticed. So the idea was launched, about 2 or 3 weeks ago that maybe the better play here is to make the second floor storage area along with units along the perimeter with a community room and a workout center, because as that north face abuts Permian Place, that's a dead wall for us. We don't have windows, the opportunity for windows on that north side. So instead of just saying we're going to change and come back with the residential component, I thought it best, and Nick and I did discuss this, I would show both, but I think we're fully on board tonight with, as I sit here with Mr. Marcus, to go with the residential component. So if that needs, consternation on the part of the planning board, we are willing to do that.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Sorry, what? Please, Mr. Long, go ahead.
I was going to ask a question straight, Marcus. I was going to ask a question.
Mr. Marcus, welcome.
For you. I had just a question. So let's say I got approved for apartments on that second floor, and a year later, I come back to you folks and say, the apartments are just not working out. I want to shift, and I want to change my second floor into office. Aren't I approved as of right because just by virtue of getting site plan approval in a D4 zone to put offices there?
Yes. Well, tonight is your final site plan approval. So, I mean, you do have a preliminary site plan.
I guess what's asking is the second floor, I guess I can shift from that in a year from now or 5 years from now or, 6 months from now after it's built. I say, apartment's just not working. I'm going to turn this into a second floor. I think he was right. That can just be done administratively because it fits the D4 zone. So no matter how you approve it, whether it's office or apartments, I think both of them are allowable.
But you have to choose one.
They are both allowable, and I would tend to agree with you that if you were approved for, let's just say residential tonight, Mr. Marcus, and a year from now you said this is not working, but I would take an administrative approval of you shifting that use from office to residential would be more than appropriate as long as it's not impacting anything to the exterior of the building or putting you in non-compliance, right? And it would appear that that's not the case. So,
except if they're going residential to begin with, my understanding is they will provide less parking and lifts. So there will be changes to the site plan with respect to parking if they make that change.
The lifts are subterranean. I can just add those in and
it's still part of the approval.
But it would be part of an administrative approval process because it's interior to the building as well.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but it's not just going to be the second floor that'll change. It's also going to be the subterranean.
But I think, Mr. Marcus, what we're saying is I think if you choose one tonight, which I think we need you to do, if you're amenable to it, the other, as long as you comply and it's allowable use, it would appear to us to be something that would be an administrative function later on down the road.
With all due respect, as much as I like you folks, I don't want to come back and ask for anything.
If you were just simply changing the use of the second floor from residential to office, and you're not changing anything on the exterior of the building, the massing, the height, the bulk, the setbacks, anything, simply adding in X number of lifts in the subterranean floor, which would have the same plan on the bottom floor, we would likely administratively approve it.
So let's just go with the apartment schematic to make things a little bit easier for everybody to approval. And then, if there's ever a time and place for
Thank you.
offices, we can come back and ask for administratively.
Thank you, Mr. Marcus. Appreciate that. Chris, while you're here, any comments related to any of the items that Nick brought up related to the loading? I thought I saw a couple of loading spots. Could you perhaps elaborate on that?
Yes, I would like to, actually. The loading area is on the east side of the building, on the old, or the big Woodward side. And the bay is, I think, about 18 feet wide and 40 feet deep. And it accommodates what we believe would be loading for the building. We're not a supermarket, we're not a Costco. And I believe those two trucks that are shown on that drawing in the receiving area, those are two box trucks. It could obviously be much bigger, but it's just meant to show that we do accommodate substantial loading for the use intended, which is apartments. So
you are providing two loading spaces. There's a discussion of whether they meet the letter of the ordinance, and if not, you need to just get a variance on that, is what you're suggesting.
correct. We've agreed to have to go for a variance. So.
How about with regard to the parking within the 20 feet and the screening? Do you have any comment related to that matter?
Well, the interesting thing about the site, as Brian mentioned, is that we are the only site, a D4 site, that is not in the parking assessment district. So we have to provide parking for all the uses on site. We're trying to comply with the retail component that, the city wants to see happen, as we do as well. But the more we increase the retail, the more we increase the need for the parking.
Right.
And then we also want to make parking easy for the retail uses, since we don't really have parking on Hazel. We have it on, the south side, like 4 or 5 spaces, I think. So the parking is to facilitate retail. Adding more retail in that 20-foot strip will require us to have more parking. So it's going to be the yeah, and then we can't service the retail, which is kind of a at the moment. We're between a very tall red brick building to the north and a very tall concrete wall actually to the south. So it's not an activated street to begin with. So I can't believe that retail would be a good choice of use for that Hazel frontage. So we acknowledge we would need a variance for that parking on the frontage. The issue of screening that, which was brought to my attention late today, we could certainly accomplish that. I would hate to block off some of that glass because we're already trying to meet the glazing, minimums for the first floor, which is, minimum 70%. So any screening we would have for the parking would have to be, beyond the glass, inside beyond the glass. So that's something I don't have a specific answer for at the moment, but it can certainly be done. But I hope you see the quandary.
Yeah, I do. I hope you see ours too, though.
Yeah, I mean, I would rather just eliminate it and just make it glass, frankly. But I don't know what you do with it.
Yeah.
It doesn't really serve. It's not a retail location. Got it.
Right. No, understood. Anything else to add that we should be aware of?
About the canopies.
Oh, yeah, the canopies. How about
The
those?
canopies, we did provide Nicholas late in the game, it was yesterday, the calculations for the canopies at the first level. The canopies, on 2, 3, 4 are all the 2-foot setbacks. So they meet the ordinance. The 2 canopies that Nick just circled in the blue, the one on south of Woodward is 5 feet, and that actually is per ordinance, and the one that's in Hazel is 4'2", which actually is per ordinance based on our building setback from the right of way, and the sidewalk, from the building property line to the sidewalk. But both do comply, mathematically.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Any other questions for the applicant while we're here? Mr. Kozik, let's go to you.
I know we've talked about this before, but I'm just curious, Chris, have you ever explored becoming part of the parking assessment district? I mean, you're providing a lot of on-site parking at great expense and burden. Would that benefit you in any way? Again, it at least for me, it doesn't impact how I feel about this project today, but just curious.
It would greatly affect us, and it has been discussed.
In a positive way?
In a positive way. I mean, frankly, we have to get through this first before we can actually apply.
Okay, so you might still explore that?
It's definitely on the agenda, yes.
Okay, and I know with residential, at least at the moment, our ordinance, you're still having to provide on-site parking, so it benefits you more for the retail and in the office if that were ever to happen.
Correct.
Okay.
Williams.
How about the transformer location?
There is no other way where to put it. We're going to screen it, certainly, Brian. I mean, that's a requirement, but.
No, I'm not talking about the location. He said it was empty.
Yeah, how do you screen it, Chris?
Oh, it'll be with I think I'm very proud of my transformer screening, by the way. It'll be with a metal screen, powder coated to match the rest of the building.
Okay. And then there's a point on streetscape, and that is benches and trash receptacles.
Yeah, we're certainly open to that. That was, something that it's not enough. It's just where do we put it?
Okay.
Be open to it.
Okay.
Any other questions for the applicant? Mr. Boyle?
Chris, I'm not here to sort of design the building, but I'm looking at that ground floor on Hazel. And I appreciate the dilemma you are with more retail, more parking, which, just is a tug of war. But what amenities are you providing for the residents? It's very hard to manipulate screen sharing, our own material that comes in and our screen we're looking at. So could you just tell me, what are you providing? Okay, let me be blunt. Are you providing a gym?
Yes.
This ground floor use, would that be a possible ground floor use on Hazel?
It certainly could be. We've planned for it to be adjacent on the Woodward side, as you can see from the plan that's up right now. You can see the community room, which is on Woodward for activity purposes. It's an active street, obviously. And then the fitness center is being circled by Nick, is directly adjacent to it. So we just felt that was a better place for it.
This is on the second floor, yeah?
Yeah, and again, we need the parking on the first floor, so because we're not in the parking assessment district, so.
But because according to Nick's assessment, you were overparked on the basis of the two subterranean parking spaces and the units on the ground floor. Again, it's difficult to keep all these numbers in our heads, but if you're overparked, then could you not argue that you're actually providing parking for the retail space, which is on the ground floor on South Woodward? Admittedly, it's not ideal, but most people coming into that retail space are probably going to find parking on the sidewalk anyway. You don't have to provide it for them if you've met the requirement underneath. But this allows you to then use that space for something else. And I mean, I don't want to design it for you, but I'm just trying to think aloud. You then wouldn't also need the variance.
So, Mr. Boyle, you make a very interesting point, and we did think about that. The issue that we face is, because we're not in the parking assessment district, we do not want any patrons of the retail portion going into the parking garages downstairs. We want to keep that safe and secure for the residents. We have found that residents, when they park, they want to be safe. They don't want anybody else that's not part of the complex down there for safety and security reasons. So we want to make sure we divert all our retail usage patrons into these parking spots here. And that's the issue we face. It is going to be a detriment to the property when residents say, go park, and they see strangers who are not part of the building parking next to them for long hours at a time, not knowing what they're up to, not knowing what they're doing in their cars. So we really want to separate those two facets of parking. If that makes sense.
It does. I don't want to continue this, Scott, but just, I mean, it does make sense. But on the other hand, a lot of people in Birmingham don't use decks. They don't use subterranean parking. They park on the street. That's how people use the retail in Birmingham. The decks, as you know, are almost empty at the weekends because they're used for office.
So with this,
and I think you probably meet our requirements for parking in the subterranean area. And that gives you more flexibility. I'll stop at that because obviously you've thought this out as well. I just wanted to make the point, that's all.
Well, we're going to be 10 cars over parked. And then if we eliminate these 14, we'll be 4 parks under. And we don't want to face a situation where we're having another variance on our hands. And again, you know, the value of this retail in this southern part of the district is you can provide parking to your retail that they can jump in and out. So if it's a bank branch that's here, that's going to be a very, very enticing prospect for them to say our patrons come park right behind our branch.
When last did you go to a bank branch?
I'm sorry, sir?
When last did you actually go to the bank?
This morning.
But a lot of people don't. I mean, I'm talking change. I'm thinking ahead. I'm trying to suggest that here's this dead street, which everybody says is going to be real hard for retail. And I agree with them. Anyway, I'll stop. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to start to have this debate, Scott. I'll back off.
You make a very good point, sir, but I just think, you know.
Points well taken, yeah. Robin.
Okay, thank you. That's fine. Move on.
Any other questions of the applicant? None. I will now go to the public. Is there anyone for the public who would like to comment on the proposal at hand? If you would, use the raise hand function at the bottom console. I do not see any hands going up.
This is the first time Mr. Ratner's ever attended a meeting yet.
That spoke.
And I asked him to turn on his video, and he didn't do it.
He's yes.
No
truth to the rumor that he is muted on purpose. No. We will bring it back to the board. I see no hands going up. All right, board. Conversation, discussion. You know, Mr. Boyle, I think you raised a very good point about what could be a good alternative solution related to that ground floor space that we have heard from the applicant. This is what they want to go for. Any other further kind of conversation about that? I think we've also heard that the applicant wants to go forward with the residential on floor 2. To help clear our thinking on that. Board, where are we at? Conversation? Concerns? Anyone concerned with regard to the fact that there are a couple of items that Nick just received and we have not seen any kind of formal comment on those? Or are they administrative type items?
Well, the one is the existing conditions plan, right?
Right.
And I think that that's part of the proposed resolution that the planning division has come up with. And I would say that can be approved administratively.
Okay.
They've already described it.
And the light fixtures confident that those decoratives are not going to be an issue?
Right.
Okay.
Well, I think all of the items here that are future are, in my view, because they've submitted them, we just haven't seen them, and Nick has looked at them, I think we can safely say they're subject to administrative approval.
Any conversation? Is anyone interested in moving forward in one direction or another? You know, a lot of stoic faces. Mr. Williams.
Well, Mr. Scher is not here.
Oh, I'm here.
Oh, Mr. Scher is here.
I made it back.
Yeah, and actually,
I don't want to steal your thunder.
Oh,
for
no,
the record,
you're doing good.
No, I'm not.
for the record, I do want to make it clear, Mr. Scher, you did show up right as we were beginning this conversation.
Yes.
So, you know, you will be a voting member in this, this topic. And I just want that clear for not only the record, but for the rest of the board members and the public. So.
And I apologize to the board. I had 3 machines fail, and through some miracle, God knows how, I was able to get one of them restarted.
Before I start, Mr. Chairman, how do you want to reflect in the record for the Board of Zoning Appeals our thoughts on the 20-foot minimum setback in the context of them not being in the parking assessment district with D4?
Well, that's a good point. I'll ask the board. Several of you have already kind of started arguing on their behalf, if you don't mind me saying so.
No, I know this, but they want to have their thoughts.
It would appear that at least 3 of you are content with the current configuration. And is it fair to say that you find there's no land planning or urban design issue that this particular case would result in if a variance was granted to allow the parking as stated on the plans? And I guess I'd throw that open to the board. Is the board content or does the board have concerns from a land use or urban design perspective? Should the Board of Zoning Appeals find a variance is in order?
I have no concern.
I'm content, given the unique, but I think we need to express, given the unique location of this project and the unusual 3 sides and surrounding facilities.
Okay. So, I mean, that does not need to be in a motion, Mr. Williams, if that's your question, because I think that's all.
I don't think
want to hear our opinions minuted, and I think that they have been duly noted.
All right, I'd like to make a motion then.
Please do.
All right, I'll move to approve the final site plan and design review for 469, 479 South Old Woodward Project M1, subject to the following conditions. The applicant actually has submitted revised plans clarifying the projection of all terraces and dimensions of the sidewalk to ensure the canopies meet the projection standards to be approved administratively by the Planning Division. Secondly, the applicant must provide a 20-foot minimum setback for the parking facility located on the first floor along the Hazel frontage or obtain a variance from the Board of Zoning Appeals. 3, the applicant must submit revised plans showing 2 off-street loading spaces measuring 40 feet long, 12 feet wide, and 14 feet high, and in compliance with section 4.25 of the zoning ordinance, or obtain the variance from the Board of Zoning Appeals. 4, the applicant must submit specifications on the types and placement of all proposed light fixtures to be approved administratively by the Planning Department. 5, the applicant must submit revised elevations and glazing calculations that show 70% glazing on each first floor facade, a maximum of 35% glazing on the upper floors, as well as material specifications for all new glass, or obtain a variance from the Board of Zoning Appeals. 6, the applicant has submitted an existing conditions plan and material specifications subject to approval administratively by the Planning Department. And 7, the applicant must comply with the requests of all city departments.
I suggest one addition, Brian. That is that the second floor use
be designated as residential with appropriate parking requirements.
Per the as submitted.
As submitted in the material.
Okay.
That's 8.
That would be 8. We have a motion by Mr. Williams. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Boyle. there any conversation at the board level on the motion, which again is to recommend approval of the final site plan and design, to approve the final site plan and design review of 469 to 479, subject to those 8 conditions. Mr. Kozik.
Just a number of things. I mean, this, this has been in front of us on many occasions for various different reasons. And I just want to say, I think this is a very nice project. And I don't think we've said it tonight, but I mean, this is exactly what the 2016 plan called for. Right in our downtown. It's this is an asset to this part of Birmingham. Let's think about what's there now versus what's being proposed here. Others mentioned the variance issues. I do hope that the Board of Zoning Appeals does pick up on the unique circumstances associated with this project. I have no concern whether the second floor ends up office or residential. Both totally comply with our ordinance and what it is that we want. I think the developer will find, and the architect does know, that it's not so easy to swap these things out. So they'll make a decision, I think, before it's leased, because they are very different. And they may impact the exterior. I think residential wants probably some operable windows, office typically not. I hope, because I think it's the right answer, that they do go to the commission and ask to be part of the parking assessment district, which along with it, I hope, the developer doesn't want to come visit us, and maybe it can be done administratively, but some of that parking on the first floor can go away, become more retail, or some of those common spaces that Robin spoke about, maybe those come down, activate the street, and then add more residential units and go make a bunch of money for the developer. So, I really appreciate, what's in front of us. And I think it's the right answer. And we should all be very pleased that we'll have this building filling in the missing tooth, as Mr. Ratner called it, I think many, seems like years ago. So I'm going to support the motion.
Wonderful. Any other comments regarding the motion itself? Seeing none, one last time to the general public. Is there anybody in the public who would like to comment on the motion itself? I do not see any hands going up. So we will bring it back to the board, and let us please call the roll.
Brian Williams,
Yes.
Robin Boyle,
Yes.
Scott Klein,
Yes.
Stuart Jeffries,
Yes.
Bert Kosek,
Yes.
Daniel Scher,
Yes.
Jason Emron.
Yes.
Motion unanimous. Congratulations. Thank you, Mr. Marcus, Mr. Long, Mr. Ratner, and as well some of the residents that I know are here from the adjacent buildings that took part in our long journey together. That's what democracy is all about. And I appreciate everybody's involvement and care for their community. And Mr. Marcus, we look forward to seeing the shovel in the ground. Congratulations, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Boyle, I just want to let you know one thing. I'm going to consider taking away some of those spots and still meet my requirement. That's the most critical thing for me. So I will consider, I'm going to sit down with Chris and see what we can do to accomplish that.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Let us move along. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item G1, we have a revised preliminary site plan from another old favorite here at the planning board. 35001 Woodward Avenue, the Maple. Jana, is this one you, or is this?
Yes, it is.
Jana.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, please
Okay.
go ahead and
All
walk
right.
us through what we're doing here tonight.
And as you mentioned, this is everyone's another favorite one that we've seen a whole lot of times. Just to summarize, this is the parcel at 35001 Woodward and 35075 Woodward. Currently the vacant gravel parking lot with the Hunter House on the north corner. If you remember this site, there's actually 3 parcels. There's the Hunter House parcel that was sold to the owner of the other parcel where the parking lot is, and then the city owns the parcel on the northwest corner, and that's where the parking lot is now. So I won't go through all the history unless somebody wants me to, but they've come through most recently back in April of this year. And at that time, they did get preliminary site plan approval and a CIS approval just before that for a 5-story mixed use building for the first floor containing, I think it was 3 different resident or retail spaces. Well, actually 4, if you include what was potentially to be the Hunter House, second floor office use, and then residential on the upper floors, plus 2 floors of underground parking. So all of those uses are staying the same with the exception of the only changes being on the first floor. So you can see on the screen here, and let's see, I don't know if I'm as tricky as Nick and can draw something here, but oh, there we go. Oh, see, I'm not very good. But they've added this parking lot area here. They're requesting 14 parking spaces to be added there. And the reason for this is to allow parking for the retail / restaurant space that's proposed, that's already there now. If you recall, the last time they were here, they actually had a retail space fronting along Park Street, and they had a retail space fronting along Big Woodward, as well as the corner where the Hunter House is, although it was just marked as a retail space. So what they're requesting at this time is to remove those 2 additional retail spaces and then bring in these surface parking spaces. Now, when they do that, of course, it also adds 2 more openings, ingress and egress for vehicles, one off of Hamilton and one where you enter, and then one where you exit onto Big Woodward. And I'm sorry, I think I said there was 14 parking spaces. It's actually 12. So I don't know how much you want me to go through all of the other changes. Essentially, everything is staying pretty much the same. A couple of changes where you enter the underground parking off of Park Street. There's building trash shown and building recycle. That's in the same general area, but the dumpsters have been changed a little bit in terms of where they're located. So there's 2 separate trash areas, one for the main building, and then the Hunter House at the north end has their own trash area that would come off of, they would enter off of that surface parking area that's proposed. Some of the potential issues that were called out in the zoning summary sheet that you saw with regards to that parking, we have the same issue. Previously, we had activated retail space along Park Street and along Woodward. Now that those spaces have been removed and there's surface parking proposed in that area. As you know, the parking is not permitted within 20 feet of the frontage line along the building. And in addition, it's also not screened. And I'll go to the elevation drawing in a minute. The elevations have not changed other than the 2 entrances / exits for the one-way drive off of Hamilton and onto Big Woodward. So there's no screening for those parking spaces. There is a knee wall, but it only comes up 1 foot and is required to come up 32 inches. So again, it's an issue between the glazing requirements on the first floor and the screening required to screen the off-street parking.
And Jana, this is both in the M1 Michigan Woodward Avenue frontage as well as the Park Street frontage. Is that correct? Or facades, whatever you want to call it. It's 2 locations plus the drive aisle. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
That have changed, you mean?
Well, that would be within 20 feet and that would be unscreened and open to.
Yes. So the area, if you can have the required screening and it's within 20 feet. Again, on the Woodward side, as you mentioned, there's 4, I think, parking spots that are within that 20 feet. And then again, the screening issue. And then here, also, this is a glass overhead door that comes down. So there's no screening for a portion of that. And then the knee wall exists alongside of this parking space and along here as well. But it's not high enough. It's only 1 foot and it needs to be 32 inches at least. The new entrance would be over here on Hamilton and the exit on Woodward. If you recall, previously there was some discussion about having some parking spaces on the first floor with an entry only off of Hamilton. And there was definitely some concern at that point that there was no way to get out. We talked about maybe punching it through to this entrance. Another option, of course, would be potentially to connect it to this entrance itself. But now they're not, so they're actually proposing to add 2 different vehicular entry and exit points, which does cause some issues with regards to not only the traffic, but the pedestrian crossings and sidewalks at both of those locations. So this would then have 3 vehicular entrances to the site. I think really that's pretty much covered it. Let me go and put, because there's not a lot of changes, but let me put the elevations up just so that everybody can see that.
Jana, while you're doing that, I assume you've conferred with Mr. Courier with regard to the fact that we have a currently approved site plan that is being requested for modification. Could you maybe, just for my benefit and that of the board, let us know, if this proposal is approved, it would supersede that one, correct? If this proposal was denied, would the other one still hold? Just help me through that process. What happens depending on what we want to do here tonight?
Okay, I did talk to Mr. Courier about this because, as you know, this has been before you many times. There was a preliminary site plan and a CIS approved earlier this year. Depending on what happens tonight would determine that. If you were inclined to approve this preliminary site plan, this revised preliminary site plan, then you would actually state in your motion that this would supersede the previous approval. If you decide to postpone it and take no action, of course, it doesn't affect anything. If you decide to deny it, it does not eliminate the approval on the previous preliminary site plan that was already granted by this board.
Okay, so it has no impact at that point, just for understanding things. Okay.
Approve this revised tonight, and it would then supersede the previous approval.
Fair enough. Jana, anything else you wanted to offer? I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, because all of the other things were basically the same as what was there, or was what was previously. I just did want to point out the entry points on Hamilton and Woodward. The one proposed coming in off of Hamilton is 15 feet wide, and the one that would come out onto Woodward is 23 feet wide. So those are the 2 new ones that were added, and the ordinance requires no more than 25 foot in width. And I'm sorry, the Adobe quit working, so I had to stop sharing my screen. If you need me to bring it back, let me know, and I will give it a shot again. With regards to the comments from departments, you'd see that I didn't have a lot of the updated comments at the time the reports went out. However, I haven't received any different comments whatsoever. All of the comments remain the same for the engineering department, the fire department, and the building department, and the public services and police department did not have any additional concerns other than the ones they had raised before. If you recall, the police department had previously been concerned about the parking, and they have met all of the parking requirements. So that is another point, actually, I will make, that with these additional 12 parking spaces, it means that they have on site now a total of 94 parking spaces. And this particular site is located in the parking assessment district. So the only parking required would be 59 parking spaces, and that's based on the layout of the residential units. They are not required to provide parking for any of the office or retail uses located on this site, only for the residential. So that would only require 59 spaces. There are 82 spaces in the subterranean parking levels still, which is what you saw last time, and then now they're adding 12, so that gives them a total of 94 spaces, 59 of which are required for the residential.
Any questions for Janet from the board? Mr. Jeffries.
Janet, when we came up with a parking assessment district, was part of the thought on that is that we would consolidate parking so we wouldn't have in the core downtown a bunch of surface lots, so that we could have first floor retail?
Absolutely. That was the case, and then this stops the it means that it does free up the first floor space for activated uses.
Mr. Williams?
Yeah, I'm trying to recall now. I don't recall recently, or at least in my time, that we've ever, with the exception of what we just did earlier tonight, I don't recall, particularly in the downtown area, within the parking assessment district, that we've created surface parking within 20 feet of the building facades. And the one project that comes to mind is very close, which is the Balmoral building to the south. My recollection is the surface parking at that building is adjacent to Woodward, but the building is set back from Woodward sufficiently to allow angle parking in front of that, and frankly, even also the Peabody site, should a building ever be constructed there. Am I right on that, Jana? And also on the other side of Woodward, all up and down, really from Lincoln all the way to Maple and past Maple, there is no parking within, surface parking within the confines of the existing building facade. It's all exterior to the building, either fronting on Woodward and the building being set back, or directionally either being south or north of the building itself.
I think that's correct. The parcel that you're talking about, the Balmoral, the parking there is in the MDOT right of way.
Yeah.
Not on site. Yeah.
But it's not on site. But there is surface parking. It's just not within their own property.
Right.
Is there insufficient room here along Woodward? I mean, that's a question for the developer.
Right.
For parking, I mean, I assume that affects the building structure as a whole if you were to have parking along Woodward and not within the confines of the existing building. So I think for me, I will simply say this is a difference with a distinction in my mind from the previous approval tonight. I don't recall in this circumstance where we have somebody within the parking assessment district that we've made this kind of an exception to the 20-foot minimum setback requirement. I'm obviously willing to hear from the developer, but that's just my understanding. Thank you.
Mr. Boyle.
Yes, I'd like to make a couple of comments. I think Jana was extremely kind when a few minutes ago she said that this site plan had 3 entrances to this site. It was technically correct, but she could also have said, and it'd be much more telling, I think, that this building, if approved, would have 3 entrances to a building. 3 entrances to a building where the ground floor would be 1/3 given over to parking cars. Is that really the sort of building that we want to have on arguably the most important site in Southeast Michigan? I've said this over and over and over again for 16 years. We were going to get the Hilton and that didn't work. And we've been playing around with this site for a huge amount of time. And here we've reached a position that 3 curb cuts would take cars into a building. To do what? To park a few cars for people to go and from what I can understand, pick up some food or maybe eat the food, I don't know. Is that really what we want at this site and this building in downtown Birmingham? That's where we are, and that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about anything else at present, it would appear. And I, for one, am deeply disappointed with where we've got to with this discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Boyle. Seeing no other hands from the board, Jana, I think I saw your hand peek into the screen. Were you looking to?
Yes, I just wanted to add it, just to remind you that if you remember from the last many discussions on this, the city-owned land is on the corner there as well. So this development also depends on the developer going through to the city commission and entering into a lease arrangement with the city to use the public, or to use some of the public land that's located there. And I think it's going to be a big challenge to do that in the first place, never mind if all of the ordinances are not met in the use of that public property on the corner. So I think that's something to consider as well. As I did not mention, they did not have to update their community impact study because they weren't making a lot of use changes on the upper floors and so on. But we did have our traffic consultants take a look at this because of the fact that they're adding the 2 curb cuts now with the surface parking, and their concerns were that obviously the additional 2 drives to making it 3 drives now does increase the pedestrian vehicular conflict points and makes it more unsafe, and they're not necessary because they're well over the parking. They're 82 underground already, plus these 12, bringing it up to 94. So there is a bit of a safety concern there with 3 entrances to the building, and obviously causing vehicular and pedestrian conflicts there as well. Not to mention that it's a very congested corner. Obviously, Woodward has a lot of traffic, so does Maple. So do Park and Hamilton because of the proximity to the other parking decks and people coming in and out of the public parking system getting back onto Woodward.
Any other questions as opposed to statements, because we haven't even heard from the applicant yet. Any questions related at this point? We'll go Jason first.
Well, I just want to, and I think Jana just covered it, but I think the planning department's correspondent said, like, see the Fleece and Vandenbrink letter, and I cannot find it in my packet. So if it's not in there, I was going to ask Jana to cover it. I think she just did. That being said, if that letter does exist and it's not in this packet, we might need to get that on the record in the future.
Jason, it is on page 125 of the packet because Mr. Klein actually called me on that this afternoon, and for some reason it didn't download properly in his packet, so that may have happened to you too. Also, it's not a formal letter on letterhead, it's an email.
Got it. Understand.
So
Thank you. That's probably why I couldn't find it.
Okay, sorry.
Mr. Williams?
Yeah, this is procedurally would be a question that I would ask of Janet. Now, so you've mentioned the city-owned property at the northwest corner. And the necessity, even if we were to approve this, of getting Board of Zoning appeal approval with respect to the 20-foot minimum setback and whatever items. Would the Board of Zoning Appeals not take action until, typically they don't take action until we've taken action. We know that. Would they not take action here on this variance request until they find out what the city commission's intent is with respect to the publicly owned land, or you haven't gotten that far?
Well, that would be my guess based on my experience with them and how they like to have all of the approvals in hand before you go to the BZA. But I haven't actually asked the Board of Zoning Appeals their thoughts on that. But my guess would be they would want to see what the city commission's take was first. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Scher?
Anna, our traffic engineer says that the prior plan is better in terms of access and safety. Did she give any opinion about whether this current proposed plan is adequate or inadequate?
I did not ask for her to do a complete CIS amendment or review again. I just asked her to take a look at it, and those were her comments. Her point to me, at least verbally on the phone, was everything else was met and required and was safe in the previous version. So this would make it less beneficial from a safety standpoint. It was as general as that, though.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Seeing no more questions, I see Mr. Biddison is up. I'd like to go to the applicant. Kevin, I see you. Good evening. Could you introduce yourself, and is there anything you could do to try and help us understand where we're going here and react to anything you've heard, please?
Kevin Biddison, Biddison Architecture. I'm here for the owner, 320 Martin Street, Birmingham, Michigan. basically, we hear all of the comments. This is really part of an effort for resolution of the conflict with the Hunter House group and what's going on with the site. So, really beyond that, that's what I'll say. It's part of the process that we're trying to go through, overall.
Okay. Any board members have any questions? Mr. Kozik.
There's a question that came up earlier. I think it was from Brian regarding this site is a little bit unique in that it does not have parking in the MDOT zone. Has that been explored? Kevin, can you speak to that?
Parking in the what zone? I'm sorry.
In the MDOT right away. If you look at the opposites, if you look at the other side of Big Woodward, it's got it. You look south.
There's a decel lane there, so there's really not enough depth to provide parking and protect it from the traffic as it's turning.
So you have explored that.
Yes,
you have explored it.
And Mr. Biddison is correct. There is a deacceleration lane, the right turn lane, to be more precise. Most of the frontage of that property. Other questions for the applicant at this time? Seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Biddison. Thank you, Mr. Hashem. Let us now go to the public. Is there anyone in the public that would wish to comment on this application? If you would like to, please again use the raise hand function, and I will call upon you. Mr. Cobb, welcome. If we could make sure he is unmuted.
I am trying.
There we go. Welcome, Mr. Cobb. If you could please, just for the record, introduce yourself and then please provide your comments.
Kelly Cobb, Hunter House. I appreciate the time you guys have spent on this, and hello to Hisham, Dr. Gayar. We've talked more recently than I've talked to all the members of the planning board. Just a few things. One, I do want to say that I know that there is some degree of concern by some members of the planning board that Hunter House is a thorn in the side of a development on this project, and might go so far to say that you wish I weren't there, but I am. And to make clear what I've made clear at prior planning board meetings, this is not an ideal situation for us. It's not ideal to have our food trucks parked where they are. It's not ideal to be in a pinch that we're in with regard to the property dispute. And we have sought, I know that there are in the packet, there's like 4 first floor revisions to highlight the variety of ways in which this problem is attempted to be solved, perhaps. I have sought more solutions than that, because I don't enjoy a gravel lot on the corner. I need to upgrade my building. I own a $175,000 refrigerator that's parked outside of it because my building doesn't have adequate storage for what I need. I'm grandfathered into health code. I'm grandfathered into ADA, and I would like to bring my building up to standards. And I'm not able to do that because of this pickle that we are in. I'll say that I didn't request, I just want to make this known that while we do appreciate Dr. Gayar and Kevin, you trying to provide the adequate required number of parking spaces for Hunter House as is in our agreement and in the deed restrictions. We didn't request this to come forward. It was submitted once again without our knowledge or approval, which is our right, both knowledge and approval of this when it comes before you. And I think more disconcerting than the parking side is there is not square footage noted in there. I know the planning board has requested that Hunter House isn't even noted in there. By my rough estimation of this space provided, of the retail space being provided as it relates to the current building footprint that we have, it is once again not possible for us to continue operating our restaurant in that space. And we've noted this problem in prior versions of the plans. We have a contractual right to continue operating a restaurant in that future space, and we don't have it. I don't believe that that's enough space. The health department just wouldn't approve it. It still doesn't meet the required number of parking spaces. It doesn't conform to the use of the property as required by the deed restrictions. I am continuing and have been working on this over the past several months. And Dr. Gayar, I look forward to talking to you soon about this, but on a number of different solutions to the situation to help facilitate a development here. Because I frankly need to make a change as well. I cannot keep operating in a building that was built 68 years ago. To date, all of the solutions that I put forward have not been accepted, but I'll continue to be hopeful that we can resolve this. I don't, you know, there are features of what's before you that Hunter House is in favor of, and there's features compared to prior versions and features that just don't work for us, namely that we can't operate there anymore. But I'll say that I don't think the one that before you today is the answer, and I don't think the one that you've already proved is the answer. That said, I really do believe that there is a solution, and we will find it, and we will be able to develop this property because, Mr. Boyle, I can't agree with you anymore. This is a critically important site for Birmingham. It's a critically important site for Southeast Michigan. And the difficult position that I'm in is I am viewed as the impediment to the development on this site when I really am trying my hardest to go outside of the bounds of this agreement to find a solution that works so we can get something done here on this property. The continual come to the commission or come to the planning board, ask for new changes, that's not how we solve this problem. It's a waste of your time. And so I'm going to keep working to try and solve it. I have been for months. As I said before, Dr. Gayar and I have talked since the last time that I've seen all of you. So I hope that we can find a resolution here. Whether or not you approve or disapprove tonight of this, and it goes back to the prior approved plans, you know, at the end of the day, I think it is moot. And that's all I'll say on that. And I appreciate all of you taking the time and I appreciate your attention and your expertise being thrown at a project like this. And that's all I'll say.
Thank you, Mr. Cobb. I'll just quickly respond and say that I just want on behalf of the board to state that I don't believe anybody here is wishing Hunter House was not on this project. In fact, we're looking forward to a Hunter House for the next 60 years. And we just need to make sure that it's being done properly. And as you mentioned today, you're concerned with the size of the building not even meeting operational or health standards. I mean, these are all part of the things we have to take into account. And just want you to know that we do have, we are not sitting here trying to make judgment upon any of the dealings between you and Dr. Gayar. That's between you, and we hope we both to be very successful.
Chairman Klein, if I could add one more thing because I didn't weigh in on it. The Woodward exit and the F&V response in the email. You know, I appreciate getting their input. I printed off too many of their correspondence with the city and respect them as an institution. I will say, you know, I understand their concerns with an egress onto Woodward Avenue, but I'll also say that in the past 68 years that we've been there, I don't recall a single issue ever arising there. And so, you know, data, anecdote, theoretics, whatever you want to say, and whichever path you choose to go, I respect and I understand. But, you know, as far as our Woodward egress goes, you know, I'll let the history speak for itself there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else from the public that wishes to comment on this development at this time? If you could, please use the raise your hand function. Looking out into the crowd, I do not see any other hands coming up. So let us bring it back to the board, please. Board, we started a bit of a conversation earlier, and I think we've heard some opinions clearly stated. Mr. Williams, you had your hand up.
Yeah, at some point fairly quickly here, I'm going to move to deny the revised preliminary site plan.
Okay, Mr. Schiff?
My preference would be to postpone rather than deny. I think, first of all, the current situation is not desirable. The proposed building has the potential to be a big improvement. It may not be perfect. The reality from what I've seen in the documentation is that the Hunter House has rights and we're going to have to cope. You know, if we want a building there in the foreseeable future, we're going to have to cope with the Hunter House. My concern is that while it may well be true that there hasn't been any traffic problem or accident at the Hunter House now, I don't know if when this building is built, what happens to the sightline changes. You know, is it still safe? And I don't have any, I shouldn't say it differently. The traffic study from the developer doesn't ask the right question. The right question is, given the history and expected use of the Hunter House, this through drive, you know, does it create an unsafe situation for the cars, the pedestrians? Our traffic consultant hasn't really answered that. You know, they've said this configuration isn't as good, but I don't know if it's, you know, safe or unsafe. My preference would be to get an answer to that question from our traffic consultant before acting on this application.
Mr. Kozik.
I mean, I'm incredibly frustrated by this. I don't know how many, I don't want to postpone this thing. I'm almost angry that we've spent time and time and time and time and time again on this thing. And what was put in front of us today, how's it different than, it's worse than what we've seen in the past. And we keep making the same comments. And I'm frustrated that there's, you know, I recognize some unique circumstances here, but I don't see any creative ideas that respect our zoning ordinance and all those things that we believe in, and make others comply, and others have complied. You know, it's the same thing. It's one group coming in front of us, showing us a really bad site plan, and someone else who says, I'm a tenant here, and doesn't even accept the plan. So I dismiss the Hunter House, meaning it could be something else tomorrow. I don't know. We only can base our thoughts and opinions based on generic spaces because things change. But my God, there, you know, within this site, there's public parking directly across the street. There's surface parking there, and there's a parking structure within a half a block. So I'm not saying that I couldn't support, you know, some components of our ordinance that can't perfectly be incorporated for this site and for this building, but there's no way. There's no way I could ever support this, and I'm just frustrated because it's the same stuff we've seen before. Well, you know, if you know, from my days on the Board of Zoning Appeals, we wouldn't even look at this. We'd say there's no change of facts. Why are you in front of us again? So I don't get it. You got a creative architect, you have potentially a really cool tenant. I get that they may have some unique needs, but it just seems like such a bad plan, and we're going backwards. And I'm just really impatient with it. I'm just, it's sad. So obviously, I won't support this thing moving forward. So.
Mr. Jeffers.
Seems like the tough part of this is that if one side here wants surface parking, I didn't sense there was anybody who was big fans of that. I mean, we've set up the core of the town to not have service parking, and so I don't know. I agree with all this. I think we've been used a little bit on this. This would have been much better, like all projects, if agreement in the community is reached before you come to us, because there's been projects that have had a delay to the next meeting, all kinds of other issues, things that we haven't gotten to because we've been sitting here going around and around on the flavor of the month on this thing. And it proceeds the entire time I've even been on this. So, I mean, we've got to be like at a decade. And yeah, granted, things change and stuff like that, but we've been really spinning on the very same thing here for quite a while. And so, yeah, I don't know if I'm deny or postpone, but probably leaning towards deny because it's just been ridiculous.
So I'll jump in for a quick second. Procedurally, based on that question, to me, in this case, because there is already an approved site plan, to me, there is really no justification for a postponement, because a denial traditionally is one we try and avoid because of the repercussions of what that means to submittals in the future. In this case, were we to postpone, we'd simply be holding another spot on another agenda if we were proposing to a date certain. And if we were postponing not to a date certain, we have to notice again anyway. So to me, there's no harm to either party in denying this, which is what I would recommend we do, which would a motion which I would support. Just for the clarity of the record, you know, my reasons for that would be under Article 7, Section 7.27, specifically for, as mentioned in the motion, related to the relation to streets, driveways, and sidewalks. To expound on that, I think you've all somewhat hit on it. Purpose of the parking assessment district and the way that our downtown has been planned from the 2016 plan is completely contrary to what this site plan is all about. We saw a site earlier today that did have parking within 20 feet, but it was a very small location outside of the core of downtown, not in the parking assessment district. And in this case, we have a rather large, significant change that would impact three of the facades of this building, not to mention all of the other issues that we've mentioned. We do have to look at this not from the standpoint of historical, because that site is, with the exception of the Hunter House, which is a valuable member of our community, I might add, the rest of that site has been vacant for years and years and years. When this building is constructed, there will be multiple floors of residential with people walking, hopefully, all throughout downtown. It will bring more traffic. It will bring more pedestrian traffic, not to the point that it is going to be a detriment, but to the point that it's going to completely change the nature of this corner. And I would say change the nature of this corner for the better. It is an important corner, and it is not the corner on which we want to propose a bad design that doesn't meet even the intent of our ordinance, let alone a point here or there. So to me, my thought would be that this is something that I would support a denial tonight. Board, any further conversation? Mr. Williams, we'll go to Mr. Emery. You had your hand up.
I'm just going to reiterate basically, Scott, you said exactly what I was going to say, but you got to it before I did. In my opinion, the surface parking lot it's not needed. It's not wanted. And you're creating another egress point out on the MDOT, which I don't think is necessary either. And then for all those reasons that you'd stated, I won't be supporting this tonight.
Mr. Williams.
So I'm going to make my motion.
Go for it.
I move to deny the revised preliminary site plan for 35001 and 35075 Woodward the Maple, as the proposed site plan does not meet the requirements of Article 7, Section 7.27, specifically for which states that the site plan and its relation to streets, driveways, and sidewalks shall be such as to not interfere with or be hazardous to vehicular and pedestrian traffic.
We have a motion by Mr. Williams and seconded by Mr. Boyle. Conversation at the board level. Seeing none, I will go out to the public one last time. Is there anybody from the public that would care to comment on the motion? And I do not see any hands going up. So we will bring it back to the board. Could we please call the roll?
Brian Williams.
Absolutely, yes.
Robin Boyle. Robin Boyle.
Yes.
Scott Klein,
Yes.
Stuart Jeffries,
Yes.
Bert Kosek,
Yes.
Daniel Scher,
No.
Jason Ebron.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-1 by my count. Thank you for your comments, your time. I think you've heard our position, and I really do, again, stress that we would like to see you all be successful here, and hope that you can come to some form of conclusion where we can all make that happy and be proud of the building on this, as we've said, arguably the most important site in town, if not in Oakland County. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's move along. Well done, board. We're to miscellaneous business and communications. Gian, I have a sneaking suspicion you've got an administrative approval you want us to look at?
That is correct, I do. And I got the PDF working again, so bear with me. Okay. This request is for administrative approval for 526 Henrietta. It's a single family house, but you're wondering why are you seeing it? It's because it's actually zoned for multifamily, but there is a single family home on it. The applicant is requesting, and the architect is on the line, so I will let her speak in a minute. On this plan, there's two things that are proposed. Let's see if I can get my line drawing out. In this area here, there's I'm not very good with the lines. That's an outdoor porch, terrace, whatever you want to call it, on the upper floor. The first thing they're asking to do is enclose that area as a 3-season room with a glass enclosure. So I'll show you the details in a minute. The second item that they're asking for is with regards to this garage entry here. Right now there's 2 single garage doors and there's a post in the middle. And apparently there's a slight or a slope to the driveway. It makes it very difficult to get cars in and out with the post in the middle. They're requesting that this 2 single door garage entry be 1 double door. So that's what it is. Just so you know, here on this site, it's zoned R8, which is attached single family. There is not a requirement against the double wide garage doors because it is R8. But obviously, that's something that we deal with in the single family district, so we don't allow the double garage doors. But this shows you the corner here of Brown and Henrietta. And this shows you on here where these areas are located. So that terrace that I was talking about, the patio that they're proposing to close in, is right here in this area. Doesn't change the setback of the building, obviously, but it does add a little bit more square footage, but it is 3 seasons. So it's glass and it's not considered completely year-round habitable space. And then to move, here's the enclosed area up close. Again, it's 165 square feet total that they're proposing to add. And then here's the new garage door to show the one that they're proposing, which is it's a 2-car door. They're removing that post in the center. Here's the terrace before the enclosure. Here's the garage before the removal of that post, which makes it hard to get in. This is the door that they're proposing to put in the place. And here's a drawing of the materials that you see for the filling in of the terrace. That's glass on the roof and glass on the side.
Jan, is there anything about this that, other than it would normally have to come to us because it's R8, is there anything about this ordinance-wise that's even a little hinky?
No, it meets all of the ordinance requirements. The reason that I brought it to you is simply because of the fact that we wouldn't normally allow a double garage door on a single family house, but this is not a single family house. It's a zoned R8 attached single family, which means it's in the multi-family district. It doesn't have that garage door requirement in the books.
So it's allowed though?
It's allowed.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Scher?
For the record, Glenda Meads is the architect on an addition I'm adding to on my house. Consequently, I'm taking no part in this.
Fair enough. Anybody have a concern? Mr. Boyle, I'm sorry.
Well, this takes me back to the very early days when Janet and I were out with measuring tapes and going to look at catalogs to find the width of cars in Southeast Michigan and whether they would fit into garages or not. And I can tell you, we got a lot of pushback, Chairman Klein, over what we were doing. We felt that it would improve the aesthetic of these garages by having a pillar. We were pushed back on, but we held our ground. This may be zoned for multifamily, but unless you can convince me otherwise with a large malt whiskey, I'm looking at a single family house, correct? So if it's good enough for if this ordinance was brought into use for single family housing and R1, then, in my opinion, it should be applied to a single family house, albeit in a different zoned area. What's good for the goose should be good for the gander.
Okay. Thank you. Glenda, did you have a comment that you wanted to make? I thought I saw your hand up. Maybe introduce yourself and provide a little context for us.
Yes, am I unmuted?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Glenda Meads of Glenda Meads Architect, representing the petitioner tonight. One thing I would like to say, just a clarification, it is an attached two-family home. 526 Henrietta discussing has its front door on Henrietta. It is indeed attached to the building to the west, which fronts on Brown. So it is a family dwelling in the R8 two-family zone district. That's around there.
Okay.
Only thing I would say about the garage is the homeowners are having difficulty. I know the 8-foot in the post in the middle to mitigate the garage fronts. This garage door is set back about 5 or 6 feet, and it has brick sidewalls and overhang. So it's really recessed into the, mitigating the garage door. Those very sidewalls are part of what makes it so difficult to turn into from the street and the slight slope of the driveway. So it would really help homeowners getting in and out, making the turn, getting in and out the little upslope and those sidewalls that I do believe show in the photograph. So it's not like a garage that's sticking out with 2 car doors. They're really recessed under. Thank you.
Thank you.
It was breaking up, so I couldn't hear everything, but I went on Google Maps, and this is a two-family structure.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of the addresses is on Brown, and the other is actually on Henrietta, right? Yeah.
It's an attached single family home, which means it's 2 single families that can share the common wall.
Yeah.
So they're attached, yes.
Right.
They're sold separately.
Yeah, and but all of the across the street is commercial across Henrietta, and the homes to the south are all separate single family, not multiple.
Correct.
So I beg to differ with Robin. I don't think this is a classic single family home by analogy. It's in a different zoning district, and it in fact is a different structure.
Fair point.
And I might just add, while I absolutely respect your point, Mr. Boyle, I have a hard time trying to enforce ordinance language from a different zone simply because we want to. I'm a little concerned with our ability to even do that. Are there any concerns otherwise from the board members? Would the board like to see this, or is this something that we're okay allowing staff to move forward on administratively?
By looking at Google Maps, directly across the street from this garage is a surface parking lot for a commercial building.
Yes.
Mr. Kozik.
I think what's proposed is totally reasonable, complimentary. Glenda's talented. They're in good hands. I can support this. So.
Any other concerns, Mr. Emery?
I'm fine with this administratively. It's all okay.
Thumbs up.
I am too.
Dan's out. Robin, you gonna be okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I think we're good, Jana.
Beat into submission.
I think we're good.
Okay.
So Jana, anything else for us to discuss prior to the next agenda?
No.
So what is the next agenda? October 14th,
October
master plan, right?
Master plan, yes. We'll continue the discussion about the mixed-use districts, specifically the Haynes Square in the Rail District.
When is the joint meeting?
Joint meeting is the 19th of October, yes.
And on that agenda?
On that agenda, I believe at this time of what we have been talking about is an update on the master plan, so we can keep the commission involved and engaged and understand where we're at with that. Also a discussion of, I don't know what name to call it, the North Old Woodward project, the Bates Street extension, whatever you want to call it, that public property. That framework that we talked about the last meeting, I think that there's a plan to be a discussion on that.
Okay, I think that's enough.
Yes.
That's
okay. And
my view is if we try to put a bunch of other little topics on, we're never going to get to the crux of the master plan issue.
Right. And on the master plan front, I just want to let you know that the neighborhood packets have gone out to all of the neighborhoods, and the comment period is now it started for them to give comments back. It's on the website, went out on social media, and to the individual homeowners associations as well.
Yeah. Hey, Jana, I took a quick look today, and I know for my neighborhood, the map is wrong. It's the wrong map. And
Okay.
I think Birmingham Farms, so I didn't have time to go through it, but
What do you mean the map is wrong? Because, you know, they're proposing to change the boundaries, right?
yeah, but it shows like my neighborhood, it shows two or three streets that aren't in it now. It doesn't show any of the streets that are in it at present.
Okay, so which one is this? Birmingham Farms?
I think Birmingham Farms has got the Crestview map, and Crestview has got Pierce and Henrietta and Bates or something like that.
So you think the Birmingham Farms and the Crestview maps are switched? Is that what you're saying?
No, I don't know what the neighborhood is that has Pierce, but yeah, I think they're well, no, I think Birmingham Farms has got Crestviews. Crestview has, I don't even know what that neighborhood is. It's not an established neighborhood at the moment. And
okay, I will pass your comments along to the master planning team.
yeah, I tried to reach out to them, but they didn't get back to me. I just want to let you know, because you'll probably hear about it if anybody dials into it.
Okay, thank you.
Please. Excellent. Now, Jana, the executive order from Governor Whitmer extends through October at this point, correct?
Which executive order are you referring to?
I apologize. Related to
267?
Related to virtual meetings, the Public Meetings Act, etc.
Yes, it
We'll be
extends.
holding our meetings in October virtually, correct?
Correct. And from what I'm hearing, that's very likely to extend several more months. But at this time, it's running through October.
Okay, great. Excellent. Any other business before the board? Seeing and hearing none, no raised hands, we will call this meeting adjourned. Thank you much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Night all.
Good night.